There are so many examples of companies, including Microsoft, who have done that, and it's blown up in their face gloriously.
AI didn't fail. The company failed, right?
But now I think companies are starting to realize they got to step back a little bit and really understand the capabilities of these tools.
I am the yin to your yang or something like that. Hey, Peter, welcome back to Call Me Data.
Hey, David, how are you today? Welcome back.
Doing well, thank you.
Yes.
So
another
another
podcast. Yes. Another good shirt.
Thank you. I was going to say another week of AI headlines to discuss too, but
I know
we can talk about Aloha shirts first if you want. Now.
Well, I like talking about Aloha shirts, especially ones that I haven't seen before. Again, I go for the boring colors every week, and you stand out with your Aloha shirts, and I tell you, I am sartorial challenged.
I am the yin to your yang or something like that.
Yes, you are.
So, or something like that. All right. Are you ready? Are you ready for this segue?
I am segueing.
We may be opposites in some respects, but when it comes to AI, we both read the same article over the last few days, and I think we had a really interesting offline discussion about it that I think we want to talk about today. So
we do. I think it hit the news in a big way, and it's already popping up in conversations that we're having with clients, potential clients. So, this is preempting another topic that we had said last week that we were going to talk about this week. So, in light of that, we'd like to acknowledge that we're preempting another topic. If you were waiting for that other topic, which we decided this was highly relevant this week, so it was worth the conversation.
Yep, and we will come back and talk about the second part of our conversation about AI safety and responsible AI. Maybe next week, if not next week, soon. But well, let's not keep everyone in suspense. Like we're talking, if you haven't figured it out already, we're talking about the article that came out a few days ago now. So late August 2025. I think Fortune first reported it was based on. Was it based on it was MIT study?
Yeah, it was based on an MIT study.
Yeah.
Fortune.
And what was the headline? The headline was pretty attention grabbing, right?
Oh, geez. 95% of all AI projects fail. It was something along those lines. I forget the specific headline, which I'm actually going to try to find while we're chatting away over here. But yes, the headline was really that most AI projects do fail. Now, the headline of the report itself from MIT was the Gen AI Divide, State of AI in Business in 2025. Now, if you go looking for the report, it's kind of buried. Took me a little while to find it.
Okay. Well, I think what was certainly attention grabbing is people were like 95% fail is this, and it has led to a bunch of follow on blog posts, articles, headlines, speculating about whether or not we are in an AI bubble. Pretty wild stuff going on.
Yeah, no, I mean, yes. Are we in an AI bubble? I think was one of the outcomes from the report. And somebody, I'm not really sure where I saw the metric today, or I heard about it today, that GPT-5 is only 2% better than GPT-4. And I don't know. I see funny. This stuff in the likes of Fortune magazine, and that's not to diss Fortune magazine, but I always have to, and you and I have done this repeatedly, go back to the original research report and read it for ourselves and see what it really actually means, because it never, it's never, when it gets reported in the mainstream news, I feel like so much gets lost, and so much really important information actually gets lost. And I think if you read the report, there was some key things in there, like really good pieces of information that should have been talked about a lot, and not just the 95% of AI projects.
Yeah, I think, as you said, you lose all the nuance when you don't go back to the original sources. And there's the headline and then there's the real truth. And I guess the real truth is, I think it sounds like 95% of organizations surveyed, whatever their survey sample was, did report, little to no measurable ROI.
Right.
That part was pretty clear, but it's funny because I don't equate that with the projects failed.
No.
Like, I think there's a bunch of things that are happening here that are all wrapped up in that 95%. They're not all, they may have all had the same outcome, but they got there in different ways.
Yes, and I will tout our horn a little bit here. So you and I have been at this game for a while, and we have repeatedly said These are different projects. You have to treat them differently. These are not IT projects. And I think in reading the report, you go through a lot of the failure reasons, and a lot of them are consistent with things that we've been speaking about for quite some time. And I think I was, I don't want to say pleased by that, but I was, at least we're speaking about the right things, which I think is really critical on how to make these projects really successful.
So, yeah, I mean, I think let's be straight up on it. I think there's no reason that you have to accept a 95% likelihood of failure for your project, right? If you know what you're doing, you do the right things, and you have the right objectives.
Right.
This is a very low chance of failure. Now, and also, Peter, you talk about this all the time as an engineer. You talk about that there's bad failure and a good failure. A good failure is an experiment where you learn something that you can apply the next time around.
Right. Right. Which I think is incredibly important, especially with AI, given how fast the domain is changing, how fast technology is changing. It is. And so much of AI success is really back to the people. And you have to learn. So on a good project, where you take away some critical pieces of information, and we'll talk about that a bit, these, I don't view these as failures. I view them as really important opportunities to learn.
Yeah. And I'll also say, if you're in a company and it failed, you tried an AI rollout and it failed. AI didn't fail. The company failed, right? The company rolling it out failed to adequately plan and execute that rollout. And there's a lot of reasons, and the article doesn't give enough specific insight into every failure to say, exactly how these reasons are distributed across that 95%. But one of the ones that seems to be really common is this gross, dramatic misalignment of expectations from reality, especially when it comes to the type of AI they're deploying.
Yes.
Right? Like,
yes.
It's
100%.
It's wild. Right. So I think that the figure was 80% of the companies that responded said they were deploying what you and I would call like personal productivity tools, ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, etc.
Yep. Yeah. No, definitely a lot of that. Absolutely.
Yeah. And those are great tools to deploy. It's a great learning experience, but you're not going to see 30 or 40% ROI on those. You're not going to see efficiency gains of 50%. And yet people read the headlines and they see Satya Nadella talking about Microsoft eliminating 50% of software engineers because of AI.
Right.
And they make the very erroneous assumption that they can lift that metric and apply it to their business. And by somehow rolling out ChatGPT, they're going to have 50% productivity increase or something equally absurd.
This goes back to so much of what you and I have been speaking about for such a long time. It's, the lack of understanding and education about how to deploy this type of technology within an organization. And that it's not traditional technology, and nor should it be launched through a IT division, honestly. And I think that's why a lot of them actually fail. And this is not uncommon, but the two common places where they've had a lot of success with AI models happens to be media. Media and technology, the two places where they sort of the biggest impact using artificial intelligence, which is not a surprise. I wasn't surprised by that at all. But I think, most organizations, and you read the report, and what you see are a lot of companies go for what they perceive to be the high visibility projects, and those are the ones that always fail. High visibility, a lot of this is great. We got to show this. We got to tout it to the world. They go big, and then all of a sudden everything blows up. Now, and you and I have always said this: always go for the back office type functions. Go for the ones that are not sexy. Go for the ones that have a higher ROI. Where if it fails, nothing's blowing up, royally here.
Right.
And that's not what most organizations did.
And we see this all the time or used to see this all the time in financial services, right? Companies that, you could do some very visible customer facing investment in AI, but often the place you were going to see massive returns was back office functions, compliance functions, KYC or financial crime functions, right? Those are not sexy projects that you're going to get invited on talk shows about, but they are real savings and real efficiency gain. And I think that's an important distinction to draw here. Just because we're saying you shouldn't deploy a ChatGPT or a similar personal productivity tool and expect massive productivity gains that's not the same as saying that AI isn't going to bring you massive productivity gains. It can, but you're going to do it through much more targeted and frankly, much more complex projects that require a lot of skill, a lot of knowledge to plan and roll out. You're not going to do it by simply agreeing to pay your cloud provider another $30 a person for licenses to their personal productivity tools.
Right. That's not going to drive an ROI. That's not going to make, huge gains in productivity. There was an interesting number that came out of it. It's like, I found interesting, actually. 70% of all AI dollars spent are going towards sales and marketing. And that's not where the highest ROI is. That's like we said, it's all the back office type functions, but that's not where the money goes. So there's this huge misalignment in where the money goes. And, while there is some value in that, obviously, it's not where you're going to get the real efficiency gains. It's not where you're going to get the real ROI. It's not where you're going to get the real transformation type projects that are going to have a profound impact on your organization. That's not where you go. I call it the sugarcoating. It's the quick and easy stuff. It's, I can make nicer PowerPoints. I can do, nicer graphics. I can use Gen AI. I can do some personalization and lead generation. Those are nice things, but that's not transformational.
And I think to be fair, there probably are a handful of transformational use cases that are customer facing, right? Like doing things with call centers and customer engagement, customer support. But those are really hard to do. And it's not where any organization should be starting, right? You definitely should not be starting your AI journey in a way that's directly interacting with your customers. That's just,
right.
That's borrowing trouble where you don't already have it.
And there are so many examples of companies, including Microsoft, who have done that, and it's blown up in their face gloriously. I don't know why. I don't. You and I have worked. We've been in this for a while, and in the beginning, we were working a lot with the hyperscalers and their approach to selling AI into an organization. And I was always troubled by how they were going about doing it. I always thought it was fundamentally wrong, and that and they saw this themselves. The vast majority of the POCs that they were investing in were failing. They were taking the wrong approach. They were investing in again, hi, this looks great. I can, show the world. I can go to the CEO and show them this really sexy project. And they didn't have the skills to really deploy these things. They had to get these things done, or they were always looking at the wrong projects. And it was hard to get them away from those types of efforts. I feel like still there's this lack of true knowledge on how do you really deploy these tools effectively. Because look, the tools are incredibly powerful. Nothing changes that. Because people don't know how to implement them the right way, doesn't take away from the quality and the power of the tools, because that is clearly there.
No, I agree. And it's very fascinating to watch people, gravitate continuously, as you said, towards like the things that are glamorous and sexy versus some of the unsexy but expensive and time-consuming processes that often run in the back office of a company. And I think part of that is not that you can't attack those sexy, glamorous, customer-facing, market-forward opportunities, but you need to, earn the right to do those by building capabilities first. Right. And look, if I'm building capabilities, this is a really silly analogy, but I like to have my analogies, and the analogy for the way that a lot of people roll out, Copilot, ChatGPT, Gemini type tool to the organization, it's like they say, okay, we want you all to be musicians, and so I'm going to buy each of you a guitar. It's like, great, you bought me a guitar.
You're right.
Then they come back in a couple of months and they say, why aren't you a musician yet?
You're right. That's exactly what they're doing.
Where's my teacher? Where are my lessons? What's my homework? How do I start to build skills? You just gave me a new instrument that I've never touched before. And it's a pretty sophisticated instrument, and it's sitting here next to me, and you want to know a couple of months later why I'm not a musician yet. That's what we're doing with people.
But that's exactly what we're doing with people. And you hit the nail on the head. And there are no formal training programs in most organizations. And there was another thing that kind of came out of it, which I found quite amusing. Only 40% of the companies are actually paying for access to tools like ChatGPT and Anthropic's Claude, but 90% of the companies are actually using these tools because so many employees are being far more efficient using their own tools to get some of the work done, which I found actually, there's this whole shadow AI going on in all these organizations, which I found quite interesting.
Yeah, that's a fascinating one. I was having a conversation with someone the other day about, what are the various ways that you can look at cost justifying investments in some of these tools. And again, we're talking about personal productivity tools for individual workers to use, not AI embedded in bigger processes. And, you're going to see a little bit of productivity engagement. You're going to see all sorts of things. But the other side of it is, if you don't use them, if you don't provide those tools, you're going to have two maybe unintended side effects. One is you're going to have some people who use them anyway in this shadow AI economy that you're describing. And would you rather have them using tools going rogue or using them with whatever safeguards you try to roll out with them? And then the second is it is going to impact companies' ability to attract and retain talent. Like 100%. There are a large number of workers out there, myself included, who I would never go do a job if I couldn't use AI tools to assist me doing it. Because why? Right? Like, it's a tool I know how to use. I'm going to want to use that tool.
Well, it's like tying both your hands and your feet. I mean, why would you want to go and work on a job where you can't use these tools? Because they maximize your productivity, especially if you know how to use them efficiently. Now, I will still say, using these tools, it's still AI in the periphery. It's, even though, yes, you may be using it for complex use cases, but generally speaking, it's still kind of on the periphery. You're not using your internal data. You're not fine-tuning models. You're not doing the kinds of projects that really drive a massive ROI and a true digital transformation.
I look at the deployment of these, tools on the periphery, that the personal level. It's a very early stepping stone in your AI journey.
Yes.
It's going to give people some skills. It's going to give them some efficiency gains or maybe just job satisfaction gains. It'll have some results, but if you stop there, well, here's the problem. I think of these 95% of companies, a lot of them stopped there, but their expectations were 5 stops down the road, right? They're like, hey, we want these 50% productivity gains, but we're only going to roll out this one tool and then we'll kind of call it quits.
And I think, it's funny, you and I have a lot of experience, working in data science and just traditional ML for a very long time. And models need to be kept updated and retrained periodically. Sometimes once a day, sometimes once a week, sometimes once a month. It really just depends on how fast the domain is moving. In reading this report, it would seem that a lot of organizations are deploying them and then kind of forgetting about them and never making any changes and never, taking information that's been learned and fed back into the model, through any of the other, ways you could possibly do that. And neither when fine tuning or RAG or just using supervised learning and improving it and learning from it. They just don't do that. So they put these models out there for a process. It's static, of course. And then, after a period of time, people are like, okay, fine, this is great, but it's not changing with everything going on around me. And they just drop it and it fails, which I go, well, yeah, of course, that's obviously going to fail because you can't just put it there and forget about it. It's a tool that's constantly has to be taught. And they don't account for that. And I think that goes back to lack of education, lack of understanding, and just not knowing how to deploy, these very sophisticated pieces of software.
Right. And, as you've pointed out multiple times, you can't just sign the check, flip the switch, turn it on and walk away. There's keeping the model up to date and monitoring how it's doing. And there's keeping the people up to date and educating them. And I think the third leg of that to me is how do you bring I'll call it the soul of your company into the AI conversation. And by the soul of your company, I mean your data. Like I always say, if you use an AI model, but you're not using any of your own data in that model, you are, by definition, you are not doing anything that someone else couldn't easily do. They could reproduce exactly what you're doing. There's nothing special, nothing unique until you bring your data into the conversation.
Right, 100%. No, I absolutely agree with you. And most organizations aren't even remotely close to that. And I think that's another massive loss for them because they're not using these tools efficiently and effectively. Because your data that's your lifeblood.
Yeah, and it's literally the only thing that will make the AI model that you use behave any differently from your competitor's AI model. And exactly. It doesn't mean you have to develop a custom model. There's, as we've talked about before, any number of different ways to incorporate your data into your usage of AI. But if you're not doing that, you're using a commodity off the shelf.
I know, and it's you and I have spoken about this 100 times. You can't treat this as just a commoditized piece of software or hardware that you're going to put into your operational processes and walk away and forget about it. It's not how it operates. It's not what it is. And I think what we're seeing, and if I read that report, well, I should say, when I read the report, that was kind of my takeaway. You're treating this like every other major technical innovation in the past, 30, 35 years. It seemed like not most people have not learned a lot from that. And that this is just, it's incredibly different. You have to treat it different. That's not showing up in reports. And it goes back to, again, education. I know it's kind of cutting in the middle of this. Like if you're sitting across from a CEO right now, what would you tell them?
Very interesting. I would absolutely tell them, like, first of all, drive this out of the business, not your technology organization, and lead with people. You don't lead by rolling out a bunch of tools. You lead by finding a set of people and teaching them what the skills that you want them to have in order to use the tools effectively, and giving them those tools. And you do that and you start rolling it out gradually so that people spend enough time learning about the technology and about the tools and knowing how to use them effectively. Probably most importantly, that when you're talking about these personal productivity assistants, that is step 0.5 in a 10-step journey, right? And now, if you get it wrong, you'll stumble over all of the remaining steps. So it's an important step, but that step alone is not going to give you the kinds of returns that you could be getting. So, but yet you're right. Most a lot of AI strategies I see start and stop with, I'm going to turn on this tool for my entire workforce.
Yes, I know. That seems to be how most firms actually operate. And in the rush to deploy AI, it's like, oh, I'm going to give it to everybody. And, all of a sudden magic is going to occur. Now, the correlate to all this, there was an interesting article in Harvard Business Review, the last one, and they spoke about how Amazon deployed artificial intelligence to write the product descriptions for all the products in their entire website. Obviously, a huge time saver, as opposed to the past, and writing these things, inconsistently, whatever they were never written well. So when they initially deployed it, and it was a learning experience for them, because when they initially deployed it, 80% of the product descriptions were in fact wrong, for valid reasons. AI hallucinates, makes stuff up. It was making up facts about products that didn't exist. So yeah, it was interesting. So what they did, trying to kind of, step back, let's learn from this. Amazon's a big user of traditional machine learning. They've been in this business for decades. They get what it's like to run large statistical models, and they appreciate how they have to be retrained and taught and, develop over time. So Amazon stepped back for a minute. They took, I think it was, I want to say 10 or 15,000 existing product descriptions that were written by hand that they knew were correct. And then they used AI to try to model them, and then had people look at them and say what was right and what was wrong. And there were some common things like, I don't know, units, for instance. Something weighed, I don't know, 15 pounds, and it wouldn't pull it out of the description. So it would look for, the word LBS after the number to say, oh, okay, that's how much it weighs. Or things like really simple really simple prompts that started applying to make sure that the degree of accuracy went up quite a bit. And then over time, they also used some supervised learning on the output of these. And over time, they got far, far more accurate. But the point being, they did it the right way. It was a living, breathing system that learned over time, and they continually adjusted. They just put it there and forget about it and walk away, which is what most companies actually do.
So it's funny because I think if you look, all of the tools that we use, one of the things about them is the amount of power that's available to you in a simple user interface has gotten tremendously better over the last 2 years, right? And I actually think in some ways, everyone pays attention and talks about the new models coming out. And yes, the new models are good. Yeah. Every model is a little bit better than the last model, although better can be kind of hard to measure. And, I know some people would argue GPT-5 maybe in some ways is not the step forward they wanted, but yeah. Right. But here's the part that gets me. I'm more excited. The model's great. Okay, they're advancing. They're going to keep advancing. The excitement to me has been the capabilities of the UIs, of these tools that you have to use them with. The fact that you can, introduce uploaded documents, you can upload images, you can edit and interact with documents in the canvas that gets created, or even code that gets written right in these tools. It's becoming a richer experience. But here's my question for you. What they're doing, and they is the companies that create and build these models and provide these UIs. I feel like in some ways, maybe they're also doing enterprises a disservice because they are packaging these as if they are simple end user appliances, right? They're packaging it and like there's nothing on it that says, warning, you require technical expertise and training to use this tool. In fact, it's the opposite. It's designed so that literally, your parents and grandparents could use it and your kids could use it and you can use it at the office, right? It's anybody can use it. And I feel like maybe in some ways that's been deceptive to companies who then think of it like, oh, it's an appliance, it's a feature, I'll turn it on and I'm done. And they walk away and they don't really roll it out. They don't deploy it, support, train, monitor, and all the things that they need to do.
That's actually a very interesting way, but I think you're absolutely correct. I think you're right. I think that, I think for most of the model providers, it was a big land grab. We're going to get out in front of as many people as possible, as quickly as possible, because we want everybody using our tools. But you're right. I think they did everybody a disservice. Not the alternative in their business head, I'm assuming, was if we go slow, we take our time, somebody else is going to do exactly that. They're just going to do a land grab and then we're going to play catch up. And I get that. I understand. But now I think companies are starting to realize they got to step back a little bit and really understand the capabilities of these tools, and they're going to slow down a little bit. But you're right. But it's a big mindset change.
I think it's a huge change. I was talking to a company recently that had done an early attempt at rolling out some of these tools. And again, for personal use, they are also looking at some more, commercial industrial uses of tools and back office processes and things. But the early rollout, they kind of did it to a big batch of people all at once with no support. And it's interesting because they saw that there were people who used it and used it effectively, but the percentage of people who were regular and efficient users of the tool was way lower than you'd want it to be. And as they go through rollout now, the new rollout plan is much more phased. It's rolling it out in batches of hundreds of users and giving them hours and hours of learning, not just upfront training. Here's a tool and how to use it, but here's a tool and how to use it. And now let's come back after you've had it for a couple of weeks and talk about what else you can do. Now let's come back another couple of weeks later and hear about where have you struggled, where have you succeeded? How do we help you continue to learn, right? And you repeat that over and over again with these different cohorts of people. Right. But like that's a very different approach than just activating a technology product, right?
Oh, night and day. And look, you and I see just on a daily use of these tools. I mean, come on, we're continually learning how to, get more and more out of them. And it's been a journey. It's not something that you give. And look, we're smart, active users. We use it all the time. We read up on it all the time. We're following, the current literature and the research and everything else. Yet it took us time to get to a point where we are extremely productive with these tools, yet still learning how to do more. So the thought you're going to give it to somebody and say, just go, and they're going to write a one-line prompt and magic occurs is just irrelevant. It's crazy to me. But that's, in fact, what most organizations actually do.
It's back to, here's your guitar. Why aren't you a musician?
100%. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, so I also wonder, I mean, one of the things that you just made me think about this too is it's a learning process. Like if you had asked me and surveyed me about my efficiency using AI tools,
right,
2 years ago versus 18 months ago versus 12 months ago versus now, you'd get wildly different answers because 100%. I have learned to be more efficient. And I think it took me, I mean, look, I'll be honest. I like a lot of people, I started off, oh, this is cool. I'm going to see all the things I can do. And then I fell into the trough of disillusionment, as they call it. And I was like, all right, maybe this is just a parlor trick. And it took me a few months to really figure out how to apply these tools in my life in a way that actually helped me. And a year into that journey, I was still learning. And Now, what, 2.5, whatever, 3 years into it, I'm still learning and experimenting on how to apply these tools. I also think, I wonder what percentage of those companies measured too early. So their yardstick was wrong and they applied it too early. And they didn't give people the guitar lessons they needed to become musicians.
I think you're measured too early, or killed the projects before they had time to really develop and learn from them. And I think I remember in our early days when we were doing some work with the hyperscales, you saw that very often. They had a fixed amount of money they wanted to spend on doing a POC, and if it didn't achieve, it might have shown some green shoots, and it could have become something more, but we got to cut off funding. We can't go any further with that. And, it's not how they operate. I think most orgs need to look at this very differently and borrow from the data science and machine learning folks who, understand better that how you would deploy some of this stuff. It's not trivial. And you have to really think about it. And education is critical. Like you said, I mean, I'm still learning how to do this stuff. And we teach classes on this, and we're still understanding what we can and cannot do.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you're right. It's so much of it's a process. And to just expect people to get it is not realistic. People have to learn, experiment, and be supported in that journey. All right. So like, what would you say if someone came to us and said, "Hey, Peter, David, like, I don't want to be in that 95%. I want to be in the 5% that say it was great." What's our learning?
I am glad you asked that question, because I was actually just about to pivot to something like that. So one of the outcomes that came out of this study, which I found it was certainly interesting, it was you really should start relying on external partnerships to increase your likelihood of success. And I think there's a lot of factors in that. I think an external partnership, a good partnership, can look at your business a lot different than you would yourself. And they could point out where things can be successful because they're not married to the high visibility project. They're married to the high success projects. So you're going to get a very different perspective. And whereas you and I, when we walk in, there are other, let's look at your operational process. We look at things very differently. I think that's a great place to start. Look externally. Look for the partnerships over just buying a piece of software and putting it in place. Because again, these tools are not just, traditional software products. I think you have to look at outcomes certainly differently than you did in the past. I think that's also very, very, very critical. But again, not having unrealistic expectations. Let's not have the big sexy projects. Let's not have some we're going to lose half our staff. Using AI AI products. I mean, you might at some point. I don't dispute that, but I think in the short term, have reasonable expectations of what you can do, how you're going to go about doing it. Training is a big part of making this successful. Picking the right projects, keeping those projects going, not adding necessarily features, but adding more intelligence into the existing product. Like find something narrow and make it work, and then over time you expand out.
And I think that runs counter to what a lot of people do. I think we have a real tendency, especially with the amount of, hype and press that we're seeing around AI. There's a tendency to like shoot for the stars, go for the big gains, right?
Exactly.
And I have seen so many times, I've seen business leaders turn up their figurative nose at projects that don't sound exciting, but would get them 10, 15, 20% efficiency gains. Like, in what world? Because that's not good enough, right? They've somehow been drinking the Kool-Aid of 50% gains, 80% ROI, like, transforming your business overnight. Like, who's going to turn down a 15% efficiency gain with a reasonable investment? Like, not if you're paying attention, you're not. Right?
If you're thoughtful in how you implement this stuff, you're going to think about it logically, and you're going to realize those promises are fantasy. That doing the work is hard, and like you pointed out earlier on, using your own data and your own information is absolutely critical to getting some of those large gains. And looking at that report, it wasn't even part of the report. But if you really want to do digital transformation, you really want to get those huge gains. You really want to rewire your organization to maximize how you use AI. You have to think about this the right way. You have to look at your information. You have to make sure your data is organized and clean. You have to look at how you're going to keep the models trained over time, how you're going to run them in a production environment, how you're going to retrain your people. you have to look at a wide number of factors. These are not just trivial. Let me, fire up a good old SaaS system and give people a desktop and, magic occurs. That is not the case, and nothing can be further from the truth.
And I think that sort of, there's a couple of different types of readiness that people overlook. And the biggest one for me is that I'll say data readiness. How do you know that your data is good enough, locatable, traceable, accurate, etc., to be part of your AI solution? And again, if you're not using your data in your AI solution, then you have a bigger problem. But if you've gotten the joke and you're like, okay, I'm going to use my data, then the next question is, but how do you know you're ready? And I find a lot of organizations completely miss that part until it comes back and it surprises them in an unhappy way, right? Like, imagine, I mean, we've all heard the stories of like customer service chatbots that go back through call logs and issue tickets that have been resolved, and they find terrible advice and repeat it to the user. That's, at the end of the day, that's a data problem, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you have any idea what's in those chat logs and those trouble tickets that you're training your model to access?
And I can guarantee they probably don't. Now, I mean, this goes back to, this is a journey for most organizations. And I think it's like any new technology that comes out. There's going to be the hype curve, which I think we had a lot of the hype curve. People invested and are still investing. Now the realization that it's not as easy as you thought it was, and it's going to take a lot longer. Doesn't mean the benefits aren't there. The benefits are very significant. But you have to step back and reassess a little bit and recognize, okay, I did it once, I failed. How do I really do it now? And let me do it the right way. And that this is going to take time. It's hard, but it's like working out. It's the benefits going to be there, and it's going to be there significantly, but you have to put in the work. And most organizations are not prepared for that.
Well, okay. So another one of my terrible analogies, but you're right. Like this, failure rate sort of reminds me of someone walks in the gym and said, well, I went to the gym. It wasn't for me. It didn't work. I went like 3 times. I lifted that heavy barbell. I must have lifted it maybe 20 times last month and nothing happened. Right. Like,
it's like the post New Year's crowd that always shows up to the gym for a week.
Yeah. And then by spring break, they're wondering why they're not, don't have their bikini body or whatever they are striving for. Okay, so let's role play something here a little bit. So now pretend I'm a CEO and I just read this report and I'm kind of scared and I'm having doubts. Convince me that it doesn't have to be like this. Convince me, like, what should I expect? And do I have a right? Like, can I expect real significant gains? Or, like, how should I think about this? Because I don't want people to think we're saying that it's all, dial back your expectation. Hey, anyone will be satisfied if you lower your expectations enough. That's not what we're saying. We're saying it's a little bit more subtle than that, which is have the right expectations at the right stage as you go on this journey. So, all right. So I'm a nervous CEO. I just read the article. I'm like, oh my God, I don't know if I want to do this now. Peter, help me. What can I expect?
Well, no, I think you can expect the results that you want in the long term. You're never going to get them as fast as you want them. You have to, if you want to do this the right way, and that's not giving everybody tools. It really is a much more involved process that's just going to take time. Is the value there? Yes. But you really have to rethink how you approach, deploying artificial intelligence, using AI, digital transformation. And it's going to be very different than what you've done in the past. As you have now learned since you failed or you've read about all the failure, you have to do things differently. So don't follow what everybody else is doing and listen to the experts who actually understand how to do it the right way. And
but in this age of instant gratification, that's not the message everyone wants to hear.
No, it's not. And if you you fire up your LinkedIn profile, and I call them the AI influencers out there with the little one-line bullet. I did 400 projects and I did this and I did that. And I sit there and I put my head in my hands and I go, these people are making it so much harder for companies to actually be successful at this because they're basically selling crack. And that's not how this operates. This is much more difficult. But it's the same questions. Would you have not invested in, your cell phone infrastructure or, any other, would you have not used the internet if you knew it was going to be hard? No, you would have.
Well,
you would have.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. People are selling miracle weight loss drugs to people who don't want to have to bother going to the gym a lot.
Right.
That's what we're seeing.
Yeah.
If you want, here's the reality. If you want the substantial gains, 30, 40% productivity gains, time consuming and expensive processes, nearly fully automated, etc. Like those are all things that are achievable.
Right.
But you have to work for it. That's the truth. That's the part that people don't say. You have to work for it. You have to plan. You have to learn. It's going to be a multi-step journey, and you're not going to get there in a year. You're going to get there at the end of an arduous journey that will be full of mistakes and failures and learning experiences along the way.
Right.
No matter how good your help is and how much vision you have, it's never a smooth path.
No, well, it's the same. Look, the model providers are out there. You have your kids using these models effectively or seemingly effectively, and now you want to apply it to a complex organization, and you think it's the same thing, and it's not. It's very different. Your child, doing a homework with, one of these models versus you trying to replace people and or big complex operational processes with the same tool is not the same thing. It's very, very, very different. And I think that gets lost. And the model providers, I think, are at fault here because they make it seem like it's everybody can do this. It's magic. It just occurs. And reality is, you and I have been saying this for a very long time, it is hard. There's a lot of complexity to doing this the right way. And you can't go down that rabbit hole of thinking it's easy. It's not.
Yeah. I'll tell you one area in particular that I'm really struggling with right now in terms of whether I think it's great or terrifying. And that is all the work that's been done to make it easier and easier for people to create, okay, I'll say baby agents. They're not fully agentic solutions, but they're baby agents.
I know.
And like, there's a part of me that's like, it's like giving a baby a switchblade. Like, I'm not really sure that's what you should be doing. Like, can the baby work the switchblade? Yeah, it's easier to open than a regular knife. But do you really want to give a baby a switchblade?
Might hurt itself.
Yeah. So I'm very much of two minds about this. Like, I love the fact that what some of these agentic frameworks are delivering as far as ease of use is amazing.
Yes.
But it terrifies me that we're taking people who haven't learned to use basic AI tools yet, and now we're giving them the AI equivalent of a switchblade.
Oh, 100%. It drives me insane. All of a sudden, agents are going to solve every problem known to mankind. And reality is, I saw something the other day, and maybe I was reading X, and somebody popped up, and it was one of those questions that was so benign, but was so insightful. And he's like, what's the difference between an API and an MCP server? And you know what? I was like, you know what? In the vast majority of cases, he's actually not wrong. He's very right, because most people and most of what I see out there are a bunch of MCP servers sitting on top of a database, accessing data, not doing anything of any complexity. They're acting as an API layer. That's all they're doing.
And in fact, all they're doing is accepting a message and reformatting and passing it to an existing API in a lot of cases, right?
Exactly.
Like, yeah.
Exactly.
No, you're right. So it's a really interesting challenge because I feel like on one hand, I definitely don't want people to take away from this conversation that we're saying you shouldn't have high expectations of AI and you're not going to achieve much. Like that's not the message. But, you also shouldn't expect to be wildly successful without putting in the work and without having a strategy and without like doing a lot of the things that we always talk about. Let me ask you this. Like we talked in last week's podcast, we talked about, real and deeply unfortunate examples of the way that AI really impacts people, and AI gone wrong or used incorrectly can harm people. So now we're talking about all these tools that are getting rolled out, and it still makes me wonder sometimes. And I have said this before, tongue in cheek, but maybe I'm being more serious than I realize I am. Do you think we're going to get to a point anytime soon where people are going to have a license to operate AI to use certain features? Like if I'm going to drive a bus, I can't just buy a bus and pull up on 3rd Avenue and say, anyone want to go to Boston this weekend? I have to have a license for that. And I have to have oversight from agencies. Yeah. Same thing if I want to fly a plane, right? So because I could harm someone.
You bring up a good point. And, my general reaction to any kind of government intervention on any of these things is generally negative. But I've always said that. And I'll caveat that because, this is clearly not a black and white answer here. And I think there are areas, like let's look at the obvious ones. mental health for argument's sake. And it's something we spoke about at length last week, which was causing a lot of harm. Now, should an individual rely on something like this for mental health purposes, evaluating their own mental health? Should it be? And I don't know the answer to that is yes, because you can do real damage to somebody, especially if the model is not responding in a way. And maybe it should just augment an existing therapist or psychologist or psychiatrist, and they have access to those specialized kinds of tools. And that might be the answer. I don't know if certain knowledge should be in the hands of everybody.
And maybe some of this, maybe the answer is more of a private industry certification, right? Like there are established fields where if you want to work in engineering, certain jobs, you have to have a degree or a certification or a membership in a society.
Right.
If I want to get certain jobs at a bank, some jobs, maybe I have to have a CFA Part 2, or I have to have a CPA license, or whatever it is I have to have right here, like a Series 7 license. Right. So, like, maybe this becomes a little bit of self-regulating thing. Maybe we don't need it, but I continue to think that, like, we've got these powerful tools, and if you use them wrong, you can really mess up your company. And yet, like, there's no one's looking carefully at how they train people, who they give them to.
But, David, the old adage, a fool with a tool is still a fool. It doesn't make them smart. So now I have a tool. If I have an uber powerful tool that makes me, a qualified neurosurgeon, should I go out and do neurosurgery? Hell no. I mean, it's...
Come on, it sounds fun. You should. You should try it.
I like it. Let me go operate on somebody's brain. Hey, I got an AI tool. I can go operate on your brain. Or I can go build a bridge because I, have this tool now that can do all the engineering behind building a bridge. Doesn't make me a professional engineer. Doesn't mean I understand any of the math behind it. Doesn't mean anything. It means I can type in a prompt. So I don't know. Maybe you bring up an interesting point or an interesting thought experiment. Are there going to be, certain types of models that are so ultra domain specific that you have to really be trained on the use of them and using them effectively?
I think, to me, the answer is setting aside what that training and how you govern it, because there's a lot of ways to skin that cat and a lot of different opinions on that. Right. I intuitively want to say yes, 100% yes. There are going to be, if there aren't already, there will soon be tools and models that are so powerful that if used incorrectly, they could cause real economic or reputational damage to a company. And therefore, those companies should be thinking very carefully about how to ensure that the people they're giving, who they entrust with the keys to those tools, are qualified. Right.
And I never thought I would fall on that side of the fence, but I can certainly see there are places where you're going to have to put some controls on some of these tools.
In a world full of babies holding switchblades, someone has to have the
Somebody's going to get hurt.
Yeah.
Somebody's going to get hurt. Yeah. And I feel like sometimes we are giving a world full of, we're giving a lot of babies some switchblades.
Yeah. And look, I think we alluded to this last week when we talked about AI safety, that, in a lot of industries, the unfortunate saying is that every regulation is written in blood, right? It's written because someone or something
happened.
Yeah. And we certainly have yet to see that happen in a big, gloriously public way. But I think it's only a matter of time that we're going to see a company commit such a blunder with AI, an avoidable blunder, that it's going to make other companies sit up and notice. And look, I mean, I'm old enough to remember when that was the way it was with cybersecurity. Today, it's hard to find a board of directors that doesn't have a regular report from the chief information security officer, the CISO, right? Like CISO reporting to the board directly or indirectly is a thing that happens in an awful lot of companies today. Yes. But if you roll back 20 years, most board members had no idea what a CISO was because, they didn't even exist as a role in a lot of companies. And where they did exist, the board wasn't aware of them. And it took a series of very high profile and very expensive cybersecurity breaches at large companies for the board to suddenly say, oh, this is something we need to have our eye on because this is, could destroy the company if we get this wrong.
Right.
I think we are headed there with AI. I think that in a few years, the board is going to want to really track what is happening with AI, what guardrails the company is putting around AI, how they're deploying it, both because it costs a lot of money, and if you are foolish, you can waste a lot of money. But more importantly, if you're careless, you can cause enormous harm.
Right. I would caveat that a little bit differently. Only thing I would say is not a couple of years. I think boards need to do that stuff now.
Yeah, they should be doing it now. I think it'll be normalized in a couple of years.
Yes.
I would say to anyone who is a non-executive director on a board right now, if you don't have a regular report from someone who is looking at AI strategy and AI safety and the guardrails around it, either into your tech committee, your risk committee, or directly to the whole board, you have a gap. You have a governance gap that you need to close.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, and I don't think companies are taking it that serious yet. Most aren't, I should say, where they have somebody at the top of the house who's really deeply involved in driving strategy and making sure this is deployed the right way. I don't feel like most CEOs, I think a lot of them do what we said they were going to do, which is hand it off to the CIOs and let them do it, which is...
So I was just about to ask you that, because you said earlier, you're like, hey, this can't just be a technology project run like a bunch of other technology projects. And we've repeated that when we tried to answer the question, like, okay, how do you avoid being in the 95% that had the unhappy face? Who should run this?
Well, I think in light of not having in light of not having a chief AI officer in the firm, I think it has to be some combination between the business and technology, unfortunately. And unfortunately, I think that's just the way it has to be. But I think the business has to be deeply, deeply, deeply involved in picking the right projects, helping make them successful. In IT, obviously, I think part of the deployment. I still think, and will continue to think, you really need somebody reporting into the CEO who is deeply involved in these types of projects and can drive them forward. Because I think if you just even, I don't know, head of your business unit, head of IT, you put them together, I think what normally happens is the head of the business knows nothing about this, doesn't want to stand, and will still defer to IT. And you're back where you started. And so that's not the answer, because we saw that happen all the time when we worked in finance. Very often business,
Yes.
users, right or wrong, you had their exceptions, will just defer to technology to do what they do. And it's not the answer in this case.
I agree. With apologies to my former IT colleagues when I've had roles in the IT department, this to me is a clear case where the business should lead and IT should support. And
yes.
And I think the difference between lead and support is massive in this.
Massive.
And if you get a business leader, to your point, if you have a business leader who abdicates that leadership and just sort of passes it off to his or her technology partner, that's not the kind of leadership we need here, right?
No.
We need real,
We need real leadership. And you and I have been saying for over a year, if not longer, closer to 2 years, the CEO needs to be deeply involved. And I don't think they can punt this off to somebody else so easily. Not at this stage. And in light of not having an AI officer in the firm, the CEO really should be the proxy. They have to drive this, I think, personally, if you want it to be successful. And I think if you went through these 300 cases that MIT looked at, I can guarantee you in probably every single case, there was not a high level of sponsorship in any of them.
So no, I bet you're right. And even more than that, as you said, like if you don't have a chief AI officer, the CEO needs to lead. I would say, and when you do have a chief AI officer, the CEO still needs to be the most visible, active leader. And it comes back to something we've said a number of times, which is this is as much about teaching humans new behaviors and how to use new tools as it is about technology. Maybe it's more about teaching humans how to use behavior tools. Right. And so if that isn't a business-led, CEO-led initiative, it will never happen, right? Every great transformation happens with the CEO and cascades down. And this one is no different. You can't do it. If the CEO doesn't believe and doesn't model the behavior that they want to see in everyone, it'll never go anywhere.
No, it's never going to happen, because you're going to have your naysayers. You're going to have those that fight against you, or push back, or whatever. It has to start at the top. This has to be a very, board level or, driven by the CEO to make this successful.
I agree. Well, Peter, it has been a great pleasure once again talking about the latest news. Yeah, listen, I appreciate it.
No, again, David, another great discussion. I hope everybody enjoys it. And please, anybody has any questions, again, we say please reach out. We'd love to hear your feedback. But otherwise, I hope you enjoyed another edition of Call Me Data. David, you
All
have a
right.
great day.
Yeah, I'll see you next week, Peter. Take care.
All right, you take care now.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for watching Call Me Data. If you enjoyed our podcast, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to us on YouTube, and make sure to stay up to date with us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify.